Somebody who's perhaps seen a little bit of fog in recent days is Jan Smith. She's just become the oldest Australian woman to successfully climb Mount Everest, and she returned from Kathmandu just yesterday, I understand. Good morning, Jan.
Good morning, Matt.
Thank you for talking to us this morning. You must have done a fair bit of media in the last 24 hours or so.
A lot of bookings, yeah.
Right. And how are you feeling after what must be a fairly innovating effort to get to the top of Mount Everest? Are you feeling
Yes,
all right?
well, I'm feeling thrilled actually because it's my third attempt and I was really delighted. I started climbing on my birthday and I finished at dawn the next day.
Now, it was your intention to become the oldest woman outright to climb Mount Everest?
That would have been nice, yes.
And what happened?
A Japanese woman of 73 pipped me to the post.
Now, well, a lot of people will say that somebody over, say, the age of 60 is going to need a fair amount of help getting to the top of Mount Everest. Did you do it all yourself? I mean, were people carrying
Um,
you at any stage?
I had two very good Sherpas,
Right.
two high-altitude climbing Sherpas,
Well, obviously nobody
and,
gets to the top of Everest without Sherpas, I guess.
pardon?
Nobody gets to the top of Everest without Sherpas, it would seem, Jan.
Occasionally people do it on their own,
Oh.
but they often die on their own as well.
Mm-hmm. And were you part of a group?
Um, I was part of a team, which is called SummitClimb, and the director of that was very helpful in accommodating me. So I had an extra night's sleep before I climbed and things like that, and he didn't mind me going slowly. And so the Sherpas were quite patient, one in the front and one in the back. They carried extra oxygen for all of us, and so with that assistance, I was able to summit.
When did the idea first form that you would like to get to the top of Everest?
I've been climbing for 10 years, started off with trekking, saw the snowy peaks in the distance and in the background of some of my earlier summits on lower peaks, and I just thought that's my goal. So I've had two prior attempts on the south side in the two previous years, and
So
I got higher and higher each time, and then I changed companies and I found that SummitClimb with Dan Mazur could accommodate my needs.
how long does it take you to get from, say, the sort of level you are at when you're trekking to the top of the mountain? How long is that trip?
This trip for Everest was 11 hours, 11 to 12 hours up, starting at about 6 or 7 at night and getting there at dawn about 6 the next morning. And on the way down, it was faster. It was more like 8 hours. So it's back at 2 in the afternoon. You spend only about 10 minutes at the summit because it's very high, 8,800 metres, nearly 9 kilometres from sea level. And your oxygen's being used all the time, so you tend to just take some photos and head down again. We watched the dawn. We looked at the 365-degree view you get there of all the mountain caps of the Himalaya beneath a layer of cloud, and it's all very magic. But you don't linger because of the altitude, and you've got a long journey home, and you've got to sort of make it safely down.
What kind of toll does it take on you physically, Jan?
I'm quite exhausted. I've lost about a third of my body weight and a lot of muscle, and that was the same for everybody. Your body starts to eat itself way up there when you're just labouring away without much food, really, just a bit of glucose and water and oxygen.
What are you eating to make up the weight?
Now I'm eating everything healthy that I can think of, and there were sort of 4-course meals 3 times a day until my stomach kind of rebelled and I had to slow down, but it's the weight's gradually sort of bottom up. It sort of fills out your legs and so on. It's getting up to my arms now. So, and it was the same with all the climbers. The men were putting their fingers in a ring around their thighs saying, I've lost half my muscle. So I don't know how we actually do it. Must be on the sinews and sort of half muscle because this is happening while you're climbing.
Was there a point where you thought you might not make it to the top?
No, when I knew I was sitting out on my birthday and here was my opportunity finally to head for the summit, I just thought I'm going to be climbing all night and eventually the light will come with the dawn, and then just put my head down and just kept climbing and climbing and climbing.
Have you made friends as a result of this trip?
Yes, within our group, we've all got each other's emails, and was very grateful to the leader that he was understanding that, when I needed my extra night on oxygen, he gave me one of his tanks, and so I'm very indebted to him. And the others will be, I've only been home a day, so we'll be on the email to each other and exchanging photos, I imagine.
What's next for you, Jan? Do you feel the need to go back up to the top and do it again, or is there something else on your list?
Absolutely not, no. I don't feel that need at all. Quite the contrary. I feel I've done it now, so I don't know what I'll do next. It's a bit soon to say. Probably a bit of cycling with my husband, something that we can do around the base of mountains, maybe, not never mind the peaks anymore.
And also, I imagine, meantime, a little bit of cooking, perhaps some comfort food.
Cooking? Oh, I've just come home from Macca's for breakfast. Cooking's not my favourite thing, but yes, I have filled the fridge with food, and there will be some nice healthy soups and things like that back in Australia in the winter.
And do you have a clear enough memory of being on top to replay it in your head?
I do, yes. I looked around, I sort of photographed it in my mind. I had one or two photos left on the digital camera, but the rest of it, the 365, I just swung around and more or less photographed it with my eyes. The peaks, well, the dawn in one direction, and then these the peaks, the caps, they look like the caps of the mountains, because that was the highest one in the Himalaya, well, in the world for that matter, and it was a bit of a magical moment. I actually cried because my last two attempts were extremely thwarted. I haven't actually had a summit bid for Everest before, and so to be actually assisted with the Sherpas and the extra rest and so on just was wonderful to get that opportunity.
Were the locals appropriately impressed with your effort, Jan?
The locals are Tibetan Yakpas, which are yak herders. So they have very little English. They more or less provide the yaks that bring up your fresh food to base camp, and then it's packed up on with the Sherpas, and porters carry it beyond the yaks' capacity. So the locals were more or less yaks in yak bars. So it's not populated. Of course, around 8,000 metres. So the yak people are on the Tibetan plateau. This is from the north, from Tibet.
Nevertheless, your colleagues on the climb must have been suitably impressed, surely.
Yes, well, they were summiting too. 3 out of 5 summited, so we were very pleased to be in a little club. Of course, quite a lot of people died, particularly on the south side, so I was really pleased that I'd chosen the north, which wasn't so crowded, and far about a third of the amount of climbers. So we had a clear shot. All the people that we saw on the way up were corpses, or rather on the way down.
A very daunting trip, so it makes that all the more impressive. Well done, congratulations, and thank you for talking to us this morning, Jan.
Thanks very much, Matt.
Jan,
Bye.
bye. Jan Smith, the oldest Australian woman to successfully climb Mount Everest, is now safely back in her Melbourne home and doing